Thank you so much. Well, we don't have much time, so I can't go into too much detail, but those who know me know that I like to make sure that people know about the features that memoQ already has, even if they're maybe a little bit hidden. So this time I'm going to talk about the scripting possibilities in the templates. In addition to the automated actions that the templates give us, they also allow us to run scripts. Now, this sounds rather techy, but actually, even a translator with a local project could use that, running a macro on a file before it actually goes into memoQ. So we have certain trigger points at which we can run the scripts. That's file processing before we import a file, running a macro on a Word file before it actually goes into memoQ, processing the file after export, so after translation, that same Word file goes to Word for processing with another macro, for example. And that you can find in the templates in the automated actions. There are 2 extra tabs for processing the files before import and after export. And then there is another way. What you can do, you can actually manipulate the XLIFF file when it is inside of the project. And for that, there is the action of running the custom code at the trigger point, like when a translator delivers, when a pre-translation has been run, things like that. I'll show you some examples of when it could be run and what it can do. So let's talk about before import. There might be preparation steps that you need to do with files. I mentioned the macros in Word already. So you can run the macros in Word, for example, hiding things. Customers are very nice sometimes. They mark up text in a Word file and say, oh, this should be translated, or this should not be translated. But sometimes it's not easy to tell memoQ to exclude this text. So we need to run a macro. That is something we could do with the scripts. We can do changes to files before they import, XML files that might have to be segmented differently. Or we could, that was a segmentation, changing \n markers that say, okay, this is a line break, into something that an XML file really can interpret as a line break. And the other one, the structure changes to XML to make them multilingual. So these are these examples I'm going to show. First of all, the hiding text. So here's an example. My client was nice and told me everything is translated except the yellow highlighted text. Now, we all know there's no way to tell memoQ to just import the yellow highlighted text. So what I do is I run a macro that hides everything else unless it's yellow highlighted. That stays. Another example would be, I had a client that say, okay, I have this source text, and after translation, I would like to have the translation in the paragraph below. So each paragraph should show first the source text paragraph and then the translated paragraph. Of course, we can now go and do copy-paste, but we can do that with a macro. We can copy the source text, insert it after the source text, hide the source text, and then import the file and translate only the visible part. And in the end, we would have this nice structure that the client wanted. So this is a really very simple Word macro that can be run. Now, how is that all set up? If you go to the macro settings, there are certain things that you need to do. So first of all, you need to specify which file format is going to be processed. In my case, it's the docx files. The action needs to have a name. This is something that you can give it as you like. And then you need the connection between memoQ and the outside system that is going to process the file. In this case, it's the run office macro file. It's a Visual Basic script. It actually comes, or it doesn't come with memoQ, but you can get it from the support. So this is a default connection file between memoQ and Word, just to call up macros in the background. Then there needs to be a command line that says, okay, do this, run this macro. Other than that, you don't have to specify much. The part about input file, output file, that's always the same. But you just need to give it the name of the macro that needs to run. You add this as a task or update it if you've changed it. then definitely you need to test it. You need to give it a file, a sample file, browse to it, and click OK and say, now please run this test. Hopefully it comes back with a dialog that has this nice little 0 inside, which means, yes, everything is fine. So the macro could run. There is a blue link where you can click on. It will guide you to a temp folder where the file is that has been processed with that macro. So you can check whether the macro has run on the Word file correctly. If the dialog says -1 or -2, then you'll have to do some checking. Unfortunately, there is not much information what -1 or -2 would mean. Usually it is that the scripting file is not in the right place, or that the macro has a different name that you specify here than it actually has in Word. So it's usually simple, small things, but hard to check sometimes. After export, you would do the same thing. You would set up the same kind of connection between memoQ and Word, and just change the name of the macro that needs to run after translation. So unhiding everything so that the file then looks presentable again. Now, some of you might be working with a server. If you want to run macros on a server, then on the server machine, on the machine where memoQ server is installed, there has to be a Word installation. Because this is something that doesn't run locally, it runs on the server. Now, I'm told that this works if you have the server installed on-premise or if it's in a private cloud, but it doesn't work on the public cloud. So this is something to consider if you want to run Word macros or Excel macros on a memoQ server project. Also, the server needs to be allowed to run scripts. There's a setup in the installation tool for the memoQ server where you can set that up. There is a nice article in the online help that details what you need to do and what you need to know so that you can set up the server to do that. But definitely, you need to know a little bit about services and user setup, so it's not that trivial. You need to know a little bit. Let memoQ support or business services help you with that. Another example would be, I have this XML file, and the client says, after translation, this should be multilingual. Now, before I can add a file and translate it into several languages in XML, it actually needs to have all the language tags for the target languages in it. Without those, memoQ cannot create a multilingual file. It cannot create these tags for you because it doesn't know how they should be named. XML is notorious for you can name your own tags as you like. There is no standard. So how should memoQ know? Which means we have to prepare the file. We have to run a script to add these language tags so that memoQ knows where to put the translation into. So that would be another way where you could use a script. Or here's an example where I have an XML file. The text inside of the XML content between the content tags comes from another system, from some kind of text-based system, where the line breaks are written as \n. Now, there's not really a way to tell memoQ to segment at \n if you have XML files. What we need to do is we need to process the file and change that into something that an XML file could recognize as a break. So basically, we're changing the \n into a tag. Search and replace, simple search and replace into a tag that spells out break, which then in memoQ, in the XML import filter, we can define as, so this is an external tag, it breaks the segment. And actually, this is not something where you need an extra script for, because memoQ comes with the so-called find and replace tool. It's a tool that you can use to do find and replace and regex find and replace. It's a little bit hidden, so nobody really knows that it's there, but it's actually installed when you install memoQ. It's installed under C program files, and that's also where the configuration files need to be, where you have the search and replace commands inside. There's also an online help article on that, but I'll give you some more details. The nice thing about the find and replace tool It can not only be used to process files before import with find and replace and after export, but also while the XLIFF files are in the project. It looks similar to the setup of other scripting connections. So you would have the file format that you're dealing with, you would have a name for it. You have the script file, which is start script bat, which comes with the find and replace tool. Really, it just tells memoQ to go to the find and replace tool, run the find and replace actions that are configured in the config file. It's an XML file, and that's basically it. So it's really just connecting memoQ to the find and replace tool through that start script bat, which actually comes with memoQ. The configuration file looks something like this. So you have different sections: pre-import, post-export, and post-import, meaning inside of a memoQ project. There's a search expression for what you search for, and then there is a replace expression for what you want to replace it with. So here's the example of how to search for the \n and replace it with the break tag that we're going to use in the XML file. And the other way around, post-export, we do the thing the other way around, changing the break tags back into the \n. Now, manipulating XLIFF files while they're actually in the project. Now, the question is, why and when would you want to do that? Well, for some instances, you might want to do that. For example, if you've been in my talk yesterday about pseudo-translation, I mentioned that you can run a pseudo-translation on a file, but then it has a translation inside, right? You would have to delete it to actually use the file for further translation. But with that find and replace, you could go into the XLIFF file and delete the pseudo-translated part because you don't need it anymore. So you don't have to re-import the file or take it out of the project, import a new version of the file. You can just run a script. After pre-translation, after pseudo-translation, you would run the script to delete the pseudo-translation. Adjusting machine translation matches. Yeah, that's also something that I've had with some clients. They say, well, we use machine translation, but some of the things they do wrong, like using the wrong quote marks, for example. So in French, we have these special quote marks with the non-breaking spaces, but DeepL, for example, keeps using the straight quote marks if we have English source text. So what we did is we created a search and replace. After pre-translation with DeepL, we would go into the XLIFF file, look for everything that had the straight quote marks in the target segment, and replace them with the French quote marks. The pseudo-translation I just explained. You could set segments to locked. That's one of the examples that memoQ gives you in the online help, to lock segments that only contain numbers, for example. Or you could change the segment status, if that is necessary for whatever reason. So what the find and replace tool actually will do, it will, at the desired trigger point, like after a pre-translation, when you get the file back from the translator, whatever point in the project you want to use, you run the custom code. Then memoQ extracts or exports an memoQ file to a temp folder. That's where the action will run on the file. And afterwards, this memoQ file will be brought back into your project. It will update your file in your project and bring the changes into your project. So it's really everything running in the background in a temp folder. So what you need to do is you need to have the script that initiates the code execution. That's the start script bat, which comes with the find and replace tool. You don't really have to change it. The configuration file that contains the search and replace actions. And a sample configuration file comes with memoQ with the find and replace tool. You'll just have to adapt it. And you define the rules. It's either regular search and replace, or you can use regex search and replace. Here's an example. After document import, I run a pre-translation, then I run the custom code. Just remember, on memoQ server, custom or code execution needs to be allowed, otherwise this doesn't work. Then you get the same setup file where you specify that you have a script, that you have a configuration file, and that's basically it. There are two checkboxes that allow you to export the XLIFF to a temp folder where the script runs, and then import it back and update your file. Here's an example of such a configuration file. So we have the pre-import part that was changing the \n to that break tag, for example. Then we have a post-import part, so when the XLIFF is inside of the project. Actually, here it's a little bit more complex, but if you know regular expressions, it is doable. You need to test it a little bit, but it's doable. So basically, you need to find the part in the XLIFF file where the locked information usually is and insert that. So find the part of the XLIFF file, replace it with the same part, but add the information that the segment is locked. And then we also have the post-export part, where in this case we would change back from the XML break tag to the \n so that the file looks the same as before. Now here are some examples what else we have done with that. There was a client who had some PO files, and it's a bilingual file format, which has a source part and the area for the target part. And one of these source target items had spaces in them, just only spaces. So no text to translate, just spaces. And that, for whatever reason, prevented memoQ from creating a preview. So the screenshot on the left shows you, it was always telling loading, but never producing a preview. So we run the script, the search and replace, replacing these. It was always 5 spaces. We replaced it with something else, just dollar symbols or whatever you like. And suddenly memoQ was able to create that preview. So we run the script before and after. And it was just this one segment. Of course, you can go inside and delete it and later on put it in or do whatever. But if you have 500 files, you don't want to do that. What else have we done? Well, changing the quote marks, I just mentioned that. So this is something we have been using. Actually, with that client, we also added the status rejected so that the person who opened the file afterwards knew which segments were treated by the search and replace. So not that these segments are wrong or incorrect, just to mark them up. It's not that easy to put additional information on the XLIFF file because, for example, the comments and the status, they have ID numbers. The status rejected is something that you can just set, and you don't need to bother about any ID numbers that you might need to add. Deleting the pseudo translation after doing a pre-translation, so no need to re-import. And then I did something just for fun. I created a small Python script, put it into my template to export an XLIFF file and create an Excel file with the comments, with the segments that have comments. So it would have source and target segments and all the comments that were associated with that segment. Because way back somebody asked me, is it possible to extract all the segments with comments from memoQ? And I said, well, no, but yeah, you can export the RTF file and you have all the comments, of course. But they wanted to have an extra list as a post-mortem basis to see what has happened in the project. So whatever kind of script you want to use, it's possible. And yeah, I'm really curious to hear what kind of ideas you have, what you would like to do with these scripts, or already have done with the scripts. I'm pretty sure there are people here who have used them extensively. Anyone want to share what they have done so far?
Yeah, we had a file, or we get files on a regular basis from our customer, from their SAP system. So they have special limited characters depending on the type of information. but actually it doesn't stand in a readable way in their XML file. So we're actually running scripts beforehand and afterwards, and actually the memoQ support team helped us with the scripting because we weren't actually able to script it ourselves. We just, okay, we need this type of 40 characters for this type of information, 60 for this, 100 for this. We just need the info to be in the XML file and all is fine. We can do the QA checks in memoQ, delete them afterwards, get it back to the customer, and that was actually a big, big help because nobody sticks to the limited characters if there's not a QA. So that's a practical use for it.
Brilliant, good idea, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any questions?
Hello, thanks for the talk. We're running into an issue that we need to translate URLs, and unluckily the search and replace doesn't work with placeholders, at least for now. So if you have any ideas, so we have, let's say, domain.com/en, and we have 40 translations, and we always need to translate domain.com/DEDE, FR, and so on. And now we're doing the search replace within the project manually, but it would be nice to somehow integrate the placeholder for the language. If you have any idea, it would be
Well, you probably could use that find and replace tool because it works on the XLIFF, and there the placeholders are not placeholders, they're just pure text. So you should be able to get at them.
Yeah, but we need to replace with the language. So it should support something like ISO.
Oh, okay.
2,
So you
ISO
need.
2.
Okay.
That's the point. So we don't have it. If it would be per language, it would not be an issue. But since we have 40 languages in the project, memoQ should know on which language it does the replacement to get the right code.
Right. Maybe something after export. I'll have to think about that. Not really sure if it's possible, but if I can't solve it, then probably business services can. They're much better with it than I am, but interesting question. Thank you.
So in alignment with that, and an example of how we use it, we have a horrible file from our client, MDX. It has about 3 different ways of storing text. And we go in and with a relatively complex script, put our own string identifier before and after. And they have the same requirement to extract or translate the URLs. During that scripting process, we extract all our URLs to a separate file. That then gets imported to memoQ. And on the way back, we put it all together. That's how we dealt with that problem when we...
Oh, interesting idea. Yes, yes. Thank you so much. I think...
I just wanted to check. You were showing the execute a Word macro from the script. You said I saw the screen setting VBS file as files to be executed. So it's a Visual Basic VB script.
Visual Basic script, yes.
And you have to separate. It's not like you put the template.
No, it's a separate file that needs to be in a specific place, and you access it from the template. There's a browse button where you say, okay, go to this file, that's the one you need to use. So you need to load it.
When you export the Word macro to the external file, it's usually BAS. So it's not the BAS. Like you don't export the macro script from the Word, but you create a VB script file.
Yeah, you just connect memoQ with Word, and Word runs the macro.
Right.
So the macro file itself is not outside.
Use like an X button, something.
Yeah.
That trigger. Okay, thank you. Clear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments and questions? Again, we are perfectly on time. I just have one more comment to make, which is quite specific to this conference and pretty much any conference that has brilliant content like this one. So both of the presentations that we have heard in this session so far were brilliant on their own, but I think it's not difficult to recognize a natural connection between the two. because whatever happens in prompt lock, where a memoQ XLIFF file is in various settings run through a large language model, could be in theory scripted here once there's a command line version of prompt lock that can do the same. So, and that's what I like about conferences, that you are able to connect the ideas between various talks and create new solutions simply by listening to not just one presentation but 2 or 3, and that's something that is quite amazing. If there are no more questions, let's have a round of applause for Angelika once again. Thank you very much.